Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us today. I'm excited to introduce our topic, Understanding and Managing Microsoft Graph Consent. The subtitle is Ensuring Secure, Compliant Access with App-Only and Delegated Permissions. Over the course of this presentation, we'll explore how to effectively manage permissions, ensure security, and maintain compliance when working with Microsoft Graph. Let's get started. Let's dive into the introduction to Microsoft Graph Consent. Understanding and managing this consent is essential for ensuring secure and compliant access, especially when dealing with background services and automation scripts. Proper consent management helps us control what data our applications can access and prevents unauthorized usage. Now, it's particularly important to understand consent when we're working with app-only permissions, where there's no direct user interaction involved. This is a key point because it impacts how we grant and verify permissions in automated scenarios. Microsoft Graph itself is a powerful API that enables our apps to connect to a wide range of Microsoft 365 data and services. It's the backbone that allows seamless integration and automation across Microsoft's cloud platform. So, grasping how consent works with Microsoft Graph is fundamental to building secure, efficient, and compliant applications. This overview sets the stage for understanding the broader picture of secure access and permission management in our subsequent discussions. Let's take a moment to understand why consent is so important in Microsoft Graph. Essentially, consent is about making sure that apps only access the data they've been explicitly allowed to. Without clear consent, there's a real risk that apps might overreach, accessing more information than they should, which can lead to exposing sensitive data or even violating compliance rules. Think of consent as a security checkpoint. It acts as a gatekeeper, ensuring that apps only gain the access that has been approved either by administrators or by users themselves. This way, we maintain control over what data is being accessed and prevent any unintended exposure. Now, consent doesn't just control access, it also governs permissions. It defines which specific actions an app can perform within Microsoft 365 resources. So, understanding and managing this consent process is key to maintaining a secure, compliant environment while enabling productivity. Overall, consent is a fundamental part of managing security and permissions in Microsoft Graph, helping us protect data and ensure proper access at all times. Let's take a closer look at some common misunderstandings about consent when working with Microsoft Graph. One major issue is that this gap in understanding often leads to confusion, unexpected consent prompts, and even security blind spots within real tenant environments. This can be quite problematic because it means administrators and developers might not fully grasp when and why consent is needed, which can cause delays or security risks. Now, for non-interactive services, like background jobs or automated processes, there are no users to grant consent directly. This makes the consent process less obvious and more prone to errors, since these services rely on app-only permissions without a straightforward way for a user to approve them. Many tutorials mention consent briefly, but they often skip over the complexities involved in app-only permissions, things that are crucial to understand for proper security and functionality. So, understanding these nuances is key to managing Microsoft Graph consent effectively and avoiding common pitfalls as we move forward. Let's take a closer look at app-only versus delegated permissions. When we talk about app-only permissions, we're referring to scenarios where the application can run without a user present. In this case, the app gets direct access to resources, but only after an administrator grants consent. This setup is ideal for background services or daemons that need to operate independently. On the other hand, delegated permissions require a user to be signed in. Here, the app operates within the security context of the signed-in user, meaning its access is limited to what the user has permissions for. This is common in interactive applications where user consent and context are essential. Understanding these differences is crucial for managing Microsoft Graph consent effectively. App-only permissions are powerful for automation and server-to-server tasks, while delegated permissions are more suitable for user-driven experiences. Recognizing when to use each helps us maintain security and streamline access control across our applications. Now, let's talk about understanding and managing Microsoft Graph Consent. First, overpermissioned apps can pose serious security risks. These apps often have more access than they actually need, and because of that, they can become vulnerabilities that go unnoticed until an audit or a security incident occurs. It's crucial to keep an eye on permissions to prevent such issues. Next, unexpected consent prompts can be quite confusing, not just for users, but also for security teams. When these prompts pop up unexpectedly, they can disrupt workflows and create uncertainty about what access has been granted and to whom. Managing this effectively helps maintain smooth operations and clear security boundaries. Then, consider automation scripts that sync files across systems. These scripts typically work seamlessly until a global admin updates the consent policies. When that happens, the scripts may fail, causing operational disruptions. This highlights the importance of understanding how consent policies impact automation and planning accordingly. Finally, all these points tie back to a real-world impact. Misunderstood or poorly managed consent can lead to security gaps, operational hiccups, and even data breaches. So, it's essential to have a clear understanding of consent management within Microsoft Graph to safeguard our environments and ensure everything runs smoothly. Let's take a closer look at consent persistence and the risks involved. When permissions are forgotten or remain unused, they can actually become prime targets for attackers who are moving laterally within a tenant. This means that if permissions are left dormant, they could be exploited without anyone realizing it. Now, these long-lived permissions can quietly accumulate over time, which actually increases the attack surface of your environment. The more permissions that hang around unused, the more opportunities there are for malicious actors to find and exploit vulnerabilities. It's also important to understand that once app-only permissions are granted, they tend to persist indefinitely unless someone manually revokes or changes them. This indefinite persistence can pose a significant security risk because permissions might remain active long after they're needed or remembered, making it crucial to regularly review and manage these permissions as part of your overall security strategy. Let's talk about the permission soup problem. Understanding and managing Microsoft Graph Consent is crucial here. If we don't regularly review the permissions we've granted, they can stay unchecked and expose sensitive data silently. This unchecked permissions exposure creates a real risk, because apps can access all sites, drives, and team files across the entire tenant without us even realizing it. This situation is often called a permission soup, and it's dangerous because it hides the true level of access that apps have. Particularly broad permissions like cites, read-write, all can give far more access than the app actually needs or should have, extending beyond its intended scope. So the key takeaway is that without vigilant review and management, these permissions can become a silent threat, compromising our data security. It's important we understand this risk so we can better control and limit app access in our environment. Now, let's focus on the impact of SharePoint permissions risks, specifically when it comes to understanding and managing Microsoft Graph Consent. This is slide 9 of 25. First, it's important to realize that these risks are not limited to just a single site or a single folder. They can affect multiple sites across your entire organization. This broad scope means that a single misstep can potentially expose many different areas, making it critical to understand the full extent of what permissions are being granted. Next, there's the risk of rushing through consent approval. When approvals happen quickly or without proper oversight, it can open the door to significant data exposure. This hurried process might bypass necessary checks, leading to serious compliance violations. Now, let's talk about the scope of permissions like read-write, all. This permission covers every site and document library within your tenant. Essentially, granting this access provides full, tenant-wide access, which means anyone with this permission can view or modify a vast amount of sensitive information. And finally, I want to highlight that this scope is quite extensive, 100%. That's a complete access level, and it underscores the importance of carefully managing consent and permissions to prevent unintended data exposure or security breaches. Overall, understanding these risks helps us better safeguard our SharePoint environment by ensuring permissions are granted thoughtfully and securely. Let's talk about consent policies and admin roles. Understanding how Microsoft Graph Consent works is crucial for managing your environment effectively. One key point to remember is that changes in policies can sometimes happen unexpectedly and invalidate existing consents. This can break automation processes without warning, causing disruptions. It's important to realize that these policy changes don't just affect permissions. They also influence who is authorized to approve app access and how frequently reviews are conducted. The policies in tenant environments can vary quite a bit. Some organizations permit privileged users to grant permissions, while others restrict this authority solely to global admins. This variation impacts how you manage app access and ensures that compliance and security are maintained. Overall, staying aware of these policy nuances helps you better control consent and safeguard your environment. Now, let's talk about who can approve app-only permissions. It's important to understand that managing Microsoft Graph Consent is a key part of maintaining security and oversight. This process ensures that there is proper oversight when granting permissions, but it can also lead to rushed approvals, especially when decisions need to be made quickly under pressure. And as you can imagine, rushing approvals can increase the risk of granting excessive or inappropriate access. Typically, only certain roles, like global or privileged admins, have the authority to approve these permissions. This is because app-only permissions tend to have a broad impact and lack the context that individual user permissions provide. Therefore, admin consent is a requirement for these permissions, ensuring that someone with the right level of authority carefully evaluates their implications. So, in summary, understanding who can approve these permissions and the importance of careful oversight helps us better manage security risks related to Microsoft Graph. Let's take a closer look at the admin consent dialog and what it really means. Often, time pressures or a lack of clarity can lead us to overapprove permissions, and these overapprovals can go unnoticed for a long time. That's a big risk because it means apps might have more access than they truly need, which can be dangerous. When you click Consent, you're essentially vouching that the app needs all the permissions it's requesting, but sometimes that's not entirely clear or justified. The admin consent dialog itself acts as a critical security checkpoint. It's not just a formality, it's a warning sign that sensitive permissions are involved. It's important to treat this step seriously because it signals a moment where we must double-check whether the access being granted aligns with security policies and the principle of least privilege. By understanding this dialogue and the implications of each permission, we can better manage risks and protect our organization from potential vulnerabilities. Overpermissioning is something I see quite often, and it's a major root cause of security incidents and audit failures. When apps have more access than they really need, it not only creates unnecessary risks, but also makes compliance more complicated. It essentially broadens the attack surface, giving potential attackers more points of entry. A common reason behind this is that admins sometimes approve broader permissions than necessary. They do this to avoid delays or support tickets, which might seem like a practical shortcut at the moment. But in reality, it can lead to bigger problems down the line. So, understanding these permission practices and the dangers of overpermissioning is key. Managing permissions carefully helps us reduce security risks and stay compliant, which aligns with our overall goal of secure and efficient cloud management. Let's talk about some of the compliance and monitoring challenges we face when managing Microsoft Graph Consent. One of the key issues is that without clear records, compliance audits can quickly become stressful and prone to errors. When you don't have a straightforward way to track permissions and approvals, it's easy to miss important details. Additionally, while audit logs do exist, they tend to be quite complex and are not reviewed regularly. This creates blind spots that can lead to gaps in our understanding of how permissions are granted and used. Finally, tracking who approved specific permissions, when they did it, and why. This can be really difficult in many organizations. This difficulty hampers our ability to ensure proper oversight and maintain compliance. All these points highlight the importance of having a clear, consistent process for managing consent and permissions, especially as part of our overall security strategy. Now, let's talk about the importance of understanding and managing Microsoft Graph consent. One key aspect is regularly reviewing and documenting permission assignments. This practice helps us stay on top of who has access and ensures we maintain good security hygiene over time. It's easy to forget what permissions are granted, so periodic reviews are crucial to prevent unnecessary exposure. Speaking of unnecessary permissions, it's best to avoid selecting just-in-case options. Granting more permissions than necessary can significantly increase our risk if those permissions are exploited. We want to be precise and only give what's essential for the app to function. Another important point is carefully registering our applications. We need to distinguish between delegated permissions, which are used when users are present, and app-only permissions, which operate without user context. Understanding this difference ensures we assign the correct level of access and maintain control over app behavior. By following these best practices, regularly reviewing permissions, avoiding overpermissioning, and registering apps thoughtfully, we can better secure our environment and ensure our use of Microsoft Graph is both effective and safe. Let's talk about permission selection pitfalls. It's crucial to understand and manage Microsoft Graph consent carefully. Being aware and deliberate in our choices helps us prevent accidental overreach, which is essential for maintaining security and user trust. For example, choosing calendars. Read write instead of calendars. Read can give write access when it's not actually needed, potentially exposing more data than intended. Similarly, a common mistake is grabbing suggested permissions without fully understanding what scope they cover. Understanding the scope of each permission is key to avoiding unnecessary access. By being intentional and informed, we make sure we're only requesting the permissions that are truly necessary for our application's functionality. This careful approach aligns with the overall goal of responsible and secure app development. Let's talk about avoiding the temptation to overpermission our apps in an effort to future-proof them. It's a common trap, thinking that giving more permissions now will save us headaches later. But in reality, overpermissioning can backfire. It increases exposure, making it easier for malicious actors to cause damage if credentials are compromised. Plus, it complicates audits because there's more permission data to sift through, and it can lead to unnecessary risks down the line. That's why the core principle here is least privilege. Always assign only the minimal permissions necessary for the app to do its job. This approach not only minimizes potential damage, but also simplifies management and compliance. Remember, the goal is to grant permissions based on current needs, not future assumptions. By doing so, we enhance security, streamline audits, and limit the impact if something goes wrong. So, keep this in mind as a fundamental best practice. Minimal permissions for maximum security. Now, let's talk about ongoing management and why it's so crucial. Ensuring apps don't retain outdated or excessive access is essential for maintaining security and compliance over time. This is not a set-it-and-forget-it situation. It requires continuous oversight. When it comes to consent flows, there's an important distinction for app-only permissions. These permissions often require stricter approval from administrators because they can access more sensitive data or perform higher-level actions. It's a safeguard to prevent any unchecked access. And remember, admin consent isn't just a one-time approval. It's an ongoing process. If permissions change or if there are updates to policies, administrators need to revisit and reassess those consents. This helps ensure that access levels remain appropriate and aligned with current security standards. Finally, understanding how the admin consent flow works in practice is key. It's a dynamic process that involves regular review and adjustment. Keeping these practices in mind helps us better manage permissions and uphold the integrity of our systems. Failures in token requests can often go unnoticed, but they can quietly cause automations to break down, leading to significant business disruptions. It's crucial to understand that these failures aren't always obvious immediately, which is why monitoring and managing token requests is so important. When we talk about token acquisition, it depends on having a valid app registration, proper permissions, and correct credentials. Without these, the process can fail, and the app won't be able to access Microsoft Graph. Now, the main purpose of access tokens is to authenticate applications to Microsoft Graph without requiring user interaction. This is especially vital for automated processes and services that need seamless, secure access. In service-to-service authentication, access tokens serve as the digital credentials that verify the application's identity, allowing it to perform actions without manual login. So, making sure these tokens are obtained correctly and functioning properly is key to maintaining reliable, secure automation workflows. Let's talk about common token acquisition failures and how understanding Microsoft Graph consent is crucial in managing these issues. Sometimes, failures can go unnoticed, which means critical processes might stop working without any obvious indication. This can lead to disruptions that are hard to detect early on. When token acquisition fails, we often see error messages like invalid grant or 401 unauthorized. These errors can be quite cryptic and difficult to diagnose, especially if you're not familiar with what they signify. Diagnosing these issues presents its own challenges. For example, expired client secrets can cause failures, and missing roles or incorrect tenant consent can also be culprits. Each of these issues can prevent proper token acquisition, leading to failed requests and potential downtime. Understanding these typical issues is key to maintaining smooth operations. By recognizing the signs and underlying causes, we can troubleshoot more effectively and ensure that our processes remain secure and functional. This is all part of managing Microsoft Graph consent properly to keep our integrations running seamlessly. Let's talk about some of the risks associated with long-lived secrets and certificates. When private keys are lost or app registrations go unused, they can become attack vectors if we don't manage them properly. It's crucial to keep track of these assets to prevent potential security breaches. Mismanagement can also lead to forgotten credentials that might expire unexpectedly, which can break authentication processes and disrupt normal operations. Imagine trying to access an application, only to find that your credentials have expired without warning. That's a real headache. Additionally, secrets and certificates that are rarely rotated pose significant security risks. Regular rotation is key to reducing the window of opportunity for attackers. So overall, managing these secrets diligently helps us mitigate these vulnerabilities and maintain a stronger security posture across our systems. When it comes to the compliance implications of tokens and permissions, understanding and managing Microsoft Graph consent is crucial. Carefully defining and restricting permissions upfront is essential because it helps us avoid silent security gaps and potential compliance violations that might otherwise go unnoticed. This approach ensures we set clear boundaries from the start, reducing the risk of overpermissioning. Now, why is defining permissions upfront so important? Well, unused or excessive permissions can trigger audit flags and even lead to regulatory reviews. They can also open the door to security incidents if permissions are broader than necessary. Auditors and regulators are paying closer attention to service principals with unchecked permissions, viewing them as a significant compliance risk. Overprivileged access, for example, can give an application broad or overly permissive scopes, such as sites, read-write, all, or directory, read-write, all that provide extensive access across the entire tenant. Such scopes often go beyond what the application actually needs to perform its workflow, posing serious risks. And remember, Access tokens issued to applications directly reflect the permissions granted during app registration. These tokens don't limit or question the scope. They simply grant whatever was consented to, exactly as specified. So, managing permissions carefully from the start and understanding what each token carries is key to maintaining compliance and security. Now, let's talk about maintaining security through rotation and monitoring. When managing Microsoft Graph Consent, it's essential to shift from a set-and-forget approach to a proactive security discipline. This means continuously monitoring sign-in logs and consent audit trails to see who granted permissions, when they did it, and for what purpose. This kind of oversight helps us support accountability and ensure compliance across our environment. Next, conducting periodic permission reviews and app registration audits is crucial. By regularly checking for unused or overly broad scopes, we can prune permissions down to the least privilege necessary, reducing potential attack surfaces. This keeps our environment secure without hindering productivity. Implementing alerting mechanisms is another key step. By setting up alerts for authentication errors, we can detect issues early and respond quickly, preventing disruptions to critical business processes. Fast response times are vital in maintaining operational reliability. Using secure stores like Azure Key Vault to manage secrets and automate certificate rollovers helps us minimize human error and avoid downtime. Automating these processes ensures that secrets are rotated smoothly and securely, reducing the risk of expired credentials causing failures. Finally, regularly rotating client secrets and certificates is a best practice. This minimizes the chances of silent failures in automation workflows due to outdated credentials. It's all about making sure our security measures are active, current, and resilient against potential threats. Let's talk about closing the loop and protecting your environment by understanding and managing Microsoft Graph Consent. First, it's important to clarify the difference between delegated permissions and app-only permissions. Delegated permissions are used when a user is present and actively working, meaning the app acts on behalf of the user. App-only permissions, on the other hand, allow the app to operate independently, without user context. Recognizing these differences helps prevent overpermissioning, which can pose security risks. Next, educating your teams on permission types is crucial. When everyone understands what each permission entails, you reduce the chance of granting excessive access. Maintaining visibility into granted permissions is also key. Using consent review tools, you can detect anomalies or stale access that might otherwise go unnoticed, ensuring your environment stays secure. Leverage audit logs and review tools regularly. As your business needs evolve and compliance requirements change, revisit your app registrations accordingly. Incorporate permission and consent reviews into your operational routines. This isn't a one-time task, but an ongoing process to stay in control. It's also vital to define who has the authority to approve app permissions. For sensitive scopes, emphasize admin consent to keep oversight tight. Establish clear consent governance policies so everyone knows the boundaries and responsibilities. Finally, adopt a least privilege mindset. Always assign only the permissions necessary for the app to function, nothing more. Avoid broad scopes ending in all unless absolutely necessary, because the principle here is to minimize risk by limiting access. By following these practices, you can effectively protect your environment while supporting your team's needs. Let's wrap up with some key takeaways and a call to action. First, it's crucial to regularly review your app registrations and pare back permissions to the minimum necessary. Adopting a least privilege approach helps reduce security risks. Establishing routines for token and consent management is essential to keep your environment secure and manageable over time. Proactive security measures also include ensuring your teams understand the nuances of app-only consent. Proper education can help avoid common pitfalls and mistakes when managing permissions. Remember, ongoing education is vital to maintaining security integrity. Additionally, practices like regular secret rotation, permission audits, and continuous monitoring are fundamental. These steps help ensure reliability and minimize attack surfaces by catching issues early. Be aware that overpermissioned apps silently threaten security and compliance. Without proper management, these risks grow over time, making it harder to stay compliant and secure. Finally, consent management isn't a one-and-done task. It requires continuous governance, review, and accountability. Think of it as a dynamic, ongoing process that must be integrated into your routine to truly safeguard your environment.